Hi, this is Linda from Hoop Sisters, and today we're going to work on a different pinwheel section on our Elegant Elements quilt. These pinwheels are in rows H, I, and J toward the bottom of the quilt, toward the bottom right hand corner. So as you can see, I've got my pinwheels already stitched into my seam, and there's cute little yo-yos decorating the intersections. So let's get started and we'll show you how to make these pinwheels. So now we're going to be working on another pinwheel section of our quilt. The pinwheels will go in the lower right hand corner of the quilt. Here is a look at a finished pinwheel. So it's got fabric 6 on the top, fabric 7 on the back to give it a little bit of color, and it's all stitched in the hoop. So the supplies you will need: a piece of lightweight cutaway stabilizer, which I have in my hoop right now. You will need a piece of fabric 6, which would be the top of your pinwheel, a piece of fabric 7 for the back of your pinwheel. You'll need wash away thread, you'll need thread A, and you'll also need a neutral thread, and I'm going to use my gray. So let's get started stitching our pinwheels. It's a little difficult to see, but I did stitch step number 1 onto my cutaway stabilizer, and that's a water-soluble thread, and it basically gives me a placement stitch. For step 2, I will place fabric 6 right side up over my placement stitch, pretty much trying to get it into the center. I'll put it back under the machine, and I'll continue with water-soluble thread and stitch down fabric 6. So my fabric 6 is tacked down with the water-soluble thread. For step 3, I'm going to place thread E in the needle only and stitch some decorative stitches. Just finished up with step 3 for our decorative stitching. For step 4, we will leave thread A in the needle, and we will place fabric 7 right side to this fabric 6. Just line up all your edges and let the machine stitch your seam. So I've stitched the final seam for our pinwheel, and the instructions say to remove everything from your hoop and trim it out. My stabilizer is very wide, so to conserve a little bit, what I'm going to do is take it out and turn it around and stitch another pinwheel. Notice I had my pinwheel moved all the way to the top of my hoop. Here's an example of what they look like when they're done. There's two stitched on this piece of stabilizer because of the size of it. So what I'll do is, I won't totally trim it out. I'll just trim the fabric from the pinwheel, not the stabilizer. I'll leave about 1/4 inch on the sides. At the point, I'm going to trim right up to the stitching, being careful not to trim the stitching. And then I'll trim 1/4 inch on the other side. And that way this excess fabric won't get in my way when I rehoop it. So it started out in my hoop this direction. This would be the top of my hoop here. So I'm going to turn it around and put it back in my hoop. And I'll be able to stitch another pinwheel up here. So I just finished up my second pinwheel inside my hoop. So I'll take it out of the hoop. And now it's time to trim it up. So I'll rotary cut the 2 apart. And what we need to do is turn it over so we can see the basting line from the original tack down stitch. And we'll take a ruler, turn my trimmer by George over, and place the 1/4 inch on that basting line and trim off the top of it. And then you can either use a scissors or your rotary cutter, whatever you're comfortable with, and trim the curved edges. Here at the point, we need to trim very, very close. I don't trust myself with the rotary cutter. So we can turn it. So I I have both my sides trimmed, the top and bottom trimmed, and then I'll take my scissor and I'll do a clip right up to the stitching line, about every ½ inch or so. That way it'll make turning much easier. Do that on both sides. So after we trim it and clip it, then we can turn it right side out. And I'll very carefully take the point of my hoop scissor. I don't want to push it all the way through. Just very carefully coax that point out. And when I get it to where I'm happy, I'll take it to the iron and press it flat, and then it's ready to put on my block. So I have laying on my cutting board here blocks I-10 and H10, and you can see wherever this section of the quilt has all this bubble quilting, that's where these little pinwheels fit in. So you will just lay them in there. You'll put your raw edges of your pinwheel and your block together, and you'll lay them in there, and you'll take them to the sewing machine and machine baste within the seam allowance all the way across wherever the pinwheels lay. So we'll get that going and put that section together. So I've laid out on my cutting table blocks H10, 11, and 12, I-10, 11, and 12, and J-10, 11, and 12. And you can see how these pinwheels come together. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch them into rows and then get them all sashed and sew the rows together. And then I can take a little, if you'd like, you can take a little yo-yo and place it in the intersection. So that's the second pinwheel portion of our Elegant Elements quilt. So here I have my completed section of my pinwheel section of Elegant Elements, and I've got my seams all sewn together with my pinwheels inside them. The pinwheel sections will actually be loose, so you can attach them to your quilt either with a bead, a button, possibly another yo-yo, or you can just invisibly hand tack them in place, which I think is what I'm going to do. You get a little peek of color from the underneath fabric, which looks very nice. You can also finish off the intersections with another yo-yo or a button or whatever you'd like. So we hope you enjoyed this section of our Elegant Elements quilt.